It feels like many continue to kind of somewhat brush off higher energy prices. Markets not necessarily, though, today, thinking this war may be a short thing. How are you and the Bloomberg economics team kind of thinking about the impact, and what is the impact already?
Yeah, exactly on that point. We did a scenario exercise actually months ago, well before this conflict, looking at what could happen in the Middle East and gaming out worst case scenarios, which are what's playing out right now in terms of a direct U.S., Israel, Iran conflict. And in our estimation, if there are going to be sustained, persistent disruptions to energy facilities in the region, the Strait of Hormuz, that could actually lead oil prices to top $100. We estimate reaching up to $108 a barrel. That's not where markets are today, and we think that's probably because they think that these will be short-term disruptions. But as you mentioned, the conflict doesn't look like it's anywhere close to ending. And in fact, Iran is promising a new wave of retaliation, just as President Trump is promising a new big wave of attacks. So I think we're likely to see fighting continue for at least the next few days. The question is, how long can Iran in particular sustain its attacks while its leadership is also under siege?
Jennifer, while you're doing that scenario analysis, how are you defining short-term versus long-term, and what would it take in terms of a conflict such as this to get oil prices up to that $112 a barrel?
I think it will be key to figure out for oil markets how long they think these disruptions are going to last. The Strait of Hormuz is effectively paralyzed right now. We don't see traffic really moving through it. The United States is trying to reopen it by promising naval escorts, insurance for ships. We haven't yet seen if there's going to be much uptake on it or how the U.S. is actually going to follow through on those policies. And the risk is that even if you take out a lot of Iran's missile launchers, as the United States and Israel have to date, they still have a lot of other weapons that they can use to disrupt traffic. All it takes is the odd drone attack to make tankers question the risk assessment of whether or not it's worth trying to travel through the strait. I think what we're watching to see is, when do oil markets start to grapple with that reality, and do we start to see them price it in more? At the moment, they seem to be betting that all of this is just going to be a few more days of disruption and we're going to be back to normal very soon.
Hey, there are sometimes reports about off-ramps, and there was something this morning. This is from CNYR. Iran's deputy foreign minister, Iran ready to abandon nuclear program if the U.S. offers a satisfactory alternative. What are you guys hearing at all? Because this is what helps you figure out what the U.S. or global economic impact is. What are you hearing at all about the possibility for some kind of conclusion or off-ramp that Iran might be actually offering up to the United States?
I think an important point of context is that there are multiple actors within Iran. Not all of them speak with the same voice, right? We heard similarly de-escalatory remarks from the foreign ministry earlier this week, where they said, we're not going to close the Strait of Hormuz, at the same time that the IRGC was telling tankers to stay away. So I think it's important to pay attention to who are going to be the more authoritative voices in the system. Those are probably the ones that, for example, are more hardline, are more conservative, are less willing to work with the U.S., and are thinking, we are suffering pain, but we're going to make U.S. partners in the region and the global economy suffer more, and that's going to lead them to fold first. So at the moment, we see the more authoritative actors in Tehran just kind of digging in their heels and preparing to fight for a longer period of time.
Yeah, let's go to some of these headlines now. Iran hasn't asked for a ceasefire, the minister tells NBC. Iran edges toward choosing a new leader. The president, though, President Trump, says he should be involved. We mentioned the rise in oil prices, the stocks that are weighed down by the ramifications of that war, and Israel continues to target Iran's IRGC sites. So Jenny, on Carol's question about a potential off-ramp, we also consider the power vacuum in the country. And curious about your view on this, because the president seems to go back to what happened in Venezuela just a little over a month ago and talk about the success there, and Delcy Rodriguez is acting as president there right now. There is no Delcy Rodriguez of Iran. There is no person that the U.S. had lined up to take the role of the Ayatollah, or at least rule the country. What's a plausible scenario for what that looks like?
Yes, the contrast between Venezuela and Iran are limitless. And I think what's important to point out is, first, yes, the Islamic Republic has suffered some major losses of leaders and senior officials, but the system remains in place, and it's widespread and it is entrenched. There are people who are in the process of choosing a new supreme leader, and if for whatever reason that gets disrupted, there will be other candidates that they will choose from. The IRGC itself is 200,000 people spread across the country. So yes, Israel and U.S. strikes have taken out out quite a few of the senior leaders, but there are still many of them remaining. So I think what all of that suggests is we're not likely to see what President Trump hoped for on Saturday morning when he announced these strikes of the Iranian people rising up and taking, I think as he referred to it, their future into their own hands. What we're likely to see is either a persistence of this system or a new, but probably still authoritarian system take its place. And so I don't think we're likely to see a Venezuela model where you have a government that maybe could move towards democracy on a somewhat orderly timeline. I think the best case is we either get a ceasefire with the current system or we see a very chaotic and a very unpredictable world emerge where there is some sort of internal fighting or a complete collapse of the system and power vacuum.
And safe to say, Jenny, you need boots on the ground in order for actually even to push for more change. I mean, you guys in this story say authorities are tightening control of the streets. No organized opposition operates inside the country. So kind of business as usual to some extent.
Yeah, I think from the perspective of the United States, President Trump has been really clear to not put constraints on whether he would put boots on the ground, but that would be a really risky endeavor, put a lot of U.S. lives at risk and be very costly. So I think it's probably something he doesn't want to do. Now, there are other options. The U.S. has used proxies in the past, and that might be something that's under consideration. But the history of regime change efforts has shown you can't really change a regime just through air power alone. You have to have boots on the ground.